Under a low-hanging moon, the night held its breath, as if it knew the violence about to erupt. Mandela Johnson, 78, moved through Birmingham's streets with the steady, deliberate pace of a man who'd weathered decades of history. Each tap of his cane pulsed like a heartbeat, not just his, but that of a people who'd endured far too long. Then, sirens tore through the silence, a police cruiser skidding to a stop like a hunter cornering its mark. "Stop right there." The command sliced the air, sharp as a blade. Mandela turned, hands raised not in guilt, but in the tired surrender of a man who'd seen too much. I'm just walking," he said, his voice soft but steady. To them, he wasn't a man, but a threat, judged by the color of his skin. An officer's hand lingered over his holster, eyes alight with a fear that breeds violence. Dead on the ground, Mandela hesitated, not out of defiance, but disbelief. He'd marched through the civil rights era, faced fire hoses and snarling dogs. Yet here, in 2024, history was repeating itself. They didn't wait. Fists flew, knees struck, shouts drowned out his pleas. An old man beaten like a criminal, thrown to the pavement like garbage, his cane his only weapon, clattering uselessly. From a nearby window, a neighbor's scream pierced the chaos, her phone capturing every brutal second. But no video could halt the assault. No live stream could undo the pain. Mandela's heart, which had marched, voted, and fought, faltered. Under the weight of uniformed racism, the officers stepped back, their faces blank, hiding behind the shield of protocol, but the blood staining the concrete screamed the truth. Mandela didn't die of old age, he was killed by fear, ignorance, and a system that refused to see his humanity. As the sirens faded, a single question lingered, echoing through the streets, the nation, and history itself. How many more Mandela Johnsons must fall before America opens its eyes? He wasn't just a victim, he was a symbol, a spark, a call to reckoning. And this time, the fire he ignited won't be extinguished. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with the HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Of cameras was relentless, a staccato of bright explosions capturing the tense anticipation that hung heavy in the air. Sheriff Jackson stood behind the lectern, a row of microphones angled like eyes, watching and waiting for the words that would either build bridges or widen chasms within the heart of the city. This was more than a press conference. It was an overture to accountability, a public reckoning that demanded truth and transparency. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his father's legacy on his shoulders. A legacy that extended beyond personal grief into the very fabric of a community. Seeking justice. As reporters jostled for position, pens poised, Jackson adjusted the microphone, grounding himself in the silent promise he made to Mandela to stand resolute in the face of systemic adversity. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice steadfast, underpinned by the conviction of his mission. "The events of the past weeks have revealed critical flaws in our justice system, flaws that cost my father, Mandela Johnson, his life. Today, we take steps to confront these issues directly. It's about restoring trust and ensuring that every person in this community feels protected, valued, and heard." The crowd shifted, the collective tension palpable. Here was a sheriff, not as an authoritarian figure, but as a son and a leader, walking the tightrope of change. Jackson was acutely aware of the fragile hope hinged on his words, burning like a beacon of potential renewal. A journalist raised a hand, her expression earnest yet skeptical. A voice for the skeptical hearts tuned in across the nation. "Sheriff Jackson, what specific actions is your office taking to address racial biases within the department?" Nodding, Jackson dove into the heart of their strategy, a comprehensive plan built on introspection and action. "We're implementing mandatory BIAS training and establishing a community oversight board to support and scrutinize police activities with full transparency. It's essential to develop an open channel between our officers and the communities they serve." His words were met with a cacophony of clacking keyboards and scribbling pens, each action a transmutation of grief into the promise of reform. But, more than this, these were seeds being planted, stories being crafted, each containing threads of accountability intertwined with a renewed dedication to justice. As Jackson outlined further initiatives, diversified recruitment efforts, and the inclusion of mental health professionals in law enforcement strategies, he felt the mood of the room subtly shift. The air, though still thick with trepidation, shimmered with a burgeoning confidence, a realization that maybe, just maybe, this was the harbinger of change. Another reporter's voice pierced the ambience, their question cutting yet reflective. "Sheriff, what does justice for Mandela look like to you personally?" Caught off guard by the rawness of the inquiry, Jackson paused, images of his father standing, tall and proud amidst his roses, teaching Jackson how to patiently prune branches for maximum bloom, flashed through his mind. The all-encompassing warmth of Mandela's spirit enveloped him, strengthening his resolve. "Justice for Mandela," Jackson answered, his voice imbued with the weight of loss and a father's whispered dreams, "is ensuring that his story emboldens pathways to truth and reconciliation, preventing another senseless tragedy. It means forging a legacy rooted in compassion and fairness, not only for him, but for everyone touched by this pain." The sincerity of his words seemed to resonate deeply, creating an echo that transcended the walls of media scrutiny, sparking dialogues throughout the city and beyond. Here was hope, vulnerable yet tenaciously clinging to the possibility of healing. As the conference waned and questions gave way to reflective silence, Jackson remained at the podium, grounded by an overwhelming mix of emotions. He was peppered with flashes and lingering gazes as people, both journalists and civilians, processed the enormity of what lay before them. They were embarking on a journey not just of systemic reform, but towards a collective conscience rekindled by the flames of tragedy. When he finally stepped away from the podium, he was met by Ellen, who had observed the proceedings with a keen eye, admiration evident in her gaze. "You handled that beautifully, Jackson," she remarked, her words like a balm for his weary soul. "Mandela would be proud." Jackson nodded, turning to face the open sky and the city beyond, a canvas on which their future was slowly taking shape. Here, surrounded by the wake of his commitment, he realized that the path to justice may be fraught with challenges, but step by step, word by word, they were paving Mandela's journey into the annals of change. As Birmingham began its quiet transition into evening, a day marked not by routine, but by hope, the silent vows made under the sun matured under the stars, testaments to the unflagging spirit of resistance, and in those steadfast vows lay the promise of a community determined to rise, resilient and unbroken, guided by the unwavering light of justice that Mandela had illuminated with his sacrifice. The chaos of the night receded with the coming dawn, but the storm had left its mark, a seismic shift that now cast the sheriff's office into unprecedented turmoil. Inside the austere tiled corridors, where authority reigned, whispers echoed into a crescendo of unrest and suspicion. The looming specter of external scrutiny hovered like an impending tempest, reaching far beyond the boundaries of their embattled precinct to command the attention of city leaders. Sheriff Jackson sat behind his desk, its oak surface littered with reports, statements, and an ever-growing pile of complaints. The air in his office was thick with tension, interspersed with muffled phone calls echoing down the hall. Behind the facade of cool resolve, Jackson's heart beat rapidly, unanswered questions clawing at his resolve. In his veins flowed the duty of a peacekeeper. Frustration surged through him like a riptide, threatening to pull him under. A firm knock at the door jarred him from his thoughts. Ellen Marshall, a woman with eyes as sharp as her mind, stepped into the room. Her reputation for uncompromising justice preceded her, a fact both comforting and terrifying to Jackson as he fought to maintain his composure. Ellen was known for her ruthless pursuit of truth, a blade slicing through the conveniences of those who often wielded authority with impunity. "We have to move quickly," Ellen asserted, placing a stack of legal documents upon his desk. "Public confidence in your department is hanging by a thread, Sheriff. We cannot afford to falter now." Jackson nodded, the words striking chords of fear and resolve deep within him. "I can't let personal grievances overshadow justice," he replied, each syllable a testament to his own struggles. "But we need transparency, Ellen. Whatever happens, it has to be transparent." "Then brace yourself for what that truly means," Ellen replied, meeting his gaze with a steady assurance that both comforted and unsettled him. Together, they began meticulously orchestrating the legal strategy, preparing to navigate the labyrinth of investigation, interdepth departmental politics, and public expectation. The spotlight had been cast, and as the flames of the incident spread, it enveloped the entire precinct, casting shadows where ignorance and prejudice had long thrived. As the morning unfolded, a press conference was convened, a spectacle designed to showcase action rather than aversion, held in the precinct's front courtyard. Beneath a sun struggling to break free from the clouds, a sea of journalists gathered. Cameras clicked rhythmically, a relentless mechanical scrutiny intensified by the eager questions poised to rain down. Sheriff Jackson approached the podium, every step measured in his trek across the stage. The brunt of this confrontation lay squarely on his shoulders, each breath an exercise in self-control. "We are aware of the tragic incident that occurred involving my father, Mandela Johnson," he commenced, his voice echoing above the hushed anticipation. "It's crucial for our community to know that we are taking necessary steps to ensure an unbiased investigation. No stone will be left unturned until the truth is revealed." Questions erupted like a barrage of arrows, demanding, probing. Voices clamored for specifics, accountability, and most importantly, justice. Jackson's face remained stalwart, authoritative, yet the hint of grief delicately edged his speech with a deeper sincerity. "This is personal," he disclosed candidly, "but it's also about an urgent need for truth and a commitment to combat systemic failings that allowed this tragedy to occur." Inside crowded rooms and across touch screens, audiences witnessed a defiant promise etched into the scene. A pivotal moment when the stakes extended beyond a single tragedy. The process of seeking justice began in earnest under the watch of a public that had woken to the brutal reality and fragility of justice itself. This was just the beginning, a first step along the steep, uncertain road toward reconciliation. Yet the determination etched in Jackson's voice offered a glimmer of hope. A hope that even in darkness, the dawn of systemic change was stubbornly inching its way into view. As the sun reached its zenith over Birmingham, the nation's media descended upon the small Alabama town with a fervor that mirrored the urgency within its heart. Satellite trucks lined the streets like sentinels, their antennas pointed skyward, ready to broadcast the gravity of Mandela Johnson's tragic death to an audience hungry for every developing detail. Reporters armed with microphones and notepads canvassed the town square, each jostling for a prime vantage point to capture the community's reaction and dissect the burgeoning scandal. The clamor drew Jackson and his team into a new arena, a battlefield where the war wasn't fought with weapons, but with words and public perception. The death of Mandela Johnson was no longer confined to police logs or whispered conversations. On neighborhood porches, the incident had broken free, becoming a public spectacle, a flashpoint of national outrage that cast a harsh spotlight on the sheriff's department and its practices. Inside a modest city council chamber, hastily repurposed as a staging ground for press briefings, Jackson faced an intimidating semicircle of journalists. Ellen stood by his side, her presence both a strategic ally and a moral anchor as the questions came faster than the rhythmic clicking of camera shutters. Across the crowded room, a leading news anchor renowned for his piercing analyses and hard-hitting questions rose to speak, drawing the attention like a sorcerer casting a spell. "Sheriff Jackson," he began, his tone pointed yet measured. "This case has become emblematic of something far greater than its tragic details. How do you intend to change the systemic issues within your department that led to your father's death? Jackson took a deep breath, the room hanging on the precipice of his response. Change must begin at the core, he answered, his voice steady, yet laden with the weight of his pledge. We will implement comprehensive reviews of our policies, engage external auditors, and invest in extensive community outreach programs. This is about more than rectifying a single tragedy. It is about reshaping the institution so it serves and protects every member of the community irrespective of race. The media presence extended well beyond the image of a grieving son trying to find justice for his father. It tapped into the larger festering wound of race relations and institutionalized bias, a sickness that afflicted not just this town, but cities across the nation. As the questioning continued, Jackson found himself navigating an intricate dance of public accountability, personal pain, and professional determination. Meanwhile, beyond the walls of the council chamber, Mandela's death had inspired a domestic and global movement, social media flooded with hashtags and posts, each etched with calls for justice, solidarity, and reform. Activists, celebrities, and concerned citizens rallied around the cause, their collective voices joining in an echo that refused to be silenced. Public marches filled the streets, banners waving like seas of dissent, their slogans shouting the unspoken truths. Justice for Mandela became a rallying cry that transcended the tragic roots from which it sprung, compelling leaders to heed a conversation long postponed. But at its helm was Jackson, driven by a steely resolve not only to find closure for his father's senseless death, but to illuminate the path for others who might otherwise tread the same dark journey. Eventually, the conference drew to a close, leaving behind a heated trail of questions, headlines, and analysis that would spill onto breakfast tables and evening newscasts across the nation. Yet, even amidst the storm, glimmers of transformation began to weave themselves into Birmingham's narrative fabric. Ellen met Jackson's gaze as they left the room, her expression one of both concern and encouragement. "Well done," she assured him softly. "This is just the beginning, and every step counts." Jackson nodded, understanding implicitly the maelstrom they had yet to face. But here, under the scrutiny of the watchful eyes, a new dawn of justice approached. Not forged from cynicism or constraint, but from the earnest promise of change and the unyielding demand for accountability. As a united front, citizen, leader, and supporter, they would fight to transform their corner of the world, ensuring Mandela's legacy did not end in a tragedy, but in a renewed commitment towards justice and equality. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Birmingham, the sheriff's office remained lit by a solitary lamp on Jackson's desk. The day's chaos had receded from the bustling outer world, but the internal tumult within Jackson was tireless, raging as fervently as the headlines that screamed his father's name. There was a knock, a gentle, familiar tap at the door that signaled the arrival of his wife, Leah. Her presence was a buoy in this turbulent sea, and Jackson looked up with a mixture of relief and exhaustion as she entered. Her eyes, usually so full of vitality, were dimmed by the sorrow of shared loss. "Jackson," she whispered, the word carrying all the tender complexities of worrying, love, and unyielding support. She moved closer, her hands finding his, fingers intertwining and anchoring him to this moment of quiet, shared vulnerability. "They expect answers," Jackson started, his voice threadbare from the day's ordeals. "Not just from me, but for Mandela. They don't just want justice, they want assurance that it won't happen again." Leah nodded, her eyes locked onto his as she reassuringly squeezed his hand. "And you'll give them that. You'll find the way. Remember, you're not alone in this." The intimate moment was interrupted by the shrill ring of Jackson's phone. It was a call he had been waiting for, the opportunity to speak directly with the officers who were under investigation. He swallowed the bile rising in his throat, knowing that this was a confrontation that would challenge every fiber of his restraint. Inside the interrogation room, the atmosphere was almost unbearable, heavy with unspoken accusations, and the ghosts of a lifetime shared with the man lying in the morgue. Jackson faced the two officers, each as visibly uneasy as he was resolute. They were young, representatives of a system that had failed them, and in turn, Mandela. "What happened out there?" Jackson demanded, his tone imbued with a controlled fury that echoed through the room. The younger of the two, Officer Bean, looked away, his face a mask of internal struggle. "We thought he matched the description," Bean muttered, voice fading as the reality of their actions washed over him. "Mistake ain't an excuse for negligence," Jackson replied sharply, his own pain barely concealed beneath a veneer of professionalism. "My father didn't deserve this. No one does." Silence fell heavily between them, punctuated only by the ticking clock, its movements an unwelcome reminder of the time stretching endlessly in this purgatory-like room. Jackson tried to discern the truth amid their silence. The potential for redemption and weary eyes now dimmed by consequence and regret. "Do you know what you've taken?" he asked, his voice breaking. Not from anger alone, but from the depths of a son mourning his father. He was more than just a man, he was hope. He was history. And now he's gone, because you couldn't see past his skin. Bean struggled, his fists clenching in a futile effort to rewind the irreversible. I didn't want this," he stammered, genuinely shaken by the outcome of their preconceived actions, a truth that offered no solace in the grand scheme of justice. Jackson stood towering over the seated officers, shadows cast long across their faces. "You wanted compliance," he said, "but instead, you've ignited resistance. And know this, I will fight to ensure it doesn't happen again, to another father, to another son, to another human being." With those parting words, Jackson turned, exiting the room with Leia at his side. Outside, the hallways seemed to stretch infinitely, each step echoing the resolve simmering within him. There was no immediate remedy to heal the ache of losing Mandela, but there was a glimmer of purpose, the hope that through their loss, others might be spared from such heartache. United, they would steer this tragedy toward a transformation that would remember Mandela not for how he died, but for what his memory would inspire, a bridge over the chasm of ignorance and prejudice to justice rooted in humanity. As the sun rose again over Birmingham, its light spilled through the lace curtains of Mandela Johnson's modest bungalow, casting gentle patterns on the hardwood floors, where he had once shuffled with the steady rhythm of a life well lived. The house stood silent now, a repository of memories, delicately embroidered through decades of love, laughter, and unyielding resilience. This was more than just a building. It was a bridge between Mandela's past and his enduring legacy, a testament to a life that had touched so many. Jackson entered the sanctum of his father's living room, the familiar scent of old books and polished wood enveloping him. Each corner of the room bore a story, whispers of a rich past woven into the very fabric of their family history. In this sacred space, the weight of Mandela's absence was profound, yet paradoxically filled with an unspoken presence. The walls were adorned with photographs, a visual memoir pieced together by moments frozen in time. There was Mandela in his youth posing with a mischievous grin beside a vintage car, its polish befitting the pride of a young man forging his way against the tides of racial segregation. Here was an image with Jackson, a young boy then, gleefully, perched on his father's shoulders, the world before them as vast and promising as the open sky. Mandela's hands still seemed to shape the air, their care evident in the home's meticulously arranged shelves, each book a testament to his thirst for knowledge and understanding, a protest through wisdom against an unjust world. His collection spanned subjects, each cover telling of a quest for knowledge that defied the narrow confines dictated by the color of his skin. Amidst these memories, a soft rustle caught Jackson's attention. Leia was sorting through an old box, her gentle hands lifting objects layered with the dust of remembrance. She extracted a frail yellowed envelope sealed with the precision of a man who understood the power of words. "I found this in his desk," Leia said quietly, passing the envelope to Jackson. He accepted it with a reverence born of knowing the Wait, this ephemeral paper carried the key to untold chapters of his father's life. He opened the letter slowly, the handwritten words unfurling like a river through the landscape of his mind. It was a letter addressed to his grandchildren. Jackson's own children, meant to be read when they came of age. It spoke of dreams and wisdom, of resilience and justice, and of the immutable power of love as a force for change. Remember, he said in Mandela's unmistakable scrawl, that the battles fought today are for the freedoms of tomorrow. The fight is never for oneself alone, but for a legacy of honor, dignity, and compassion. Jackson closed his eyes, the letter's missive resonating within him. In his father's words, he found both solace and a mission, an understanding that Mandela's life was the foundation upon which a broader struggle rested, a struggle that demanded action, understanding, and transformative change. His words, they carry his spirit, lay amused, gently squeezing Jackson's shoulder. In this, he's ensured that he remains with us, guiding us. They sat there in Mandela's living room, enveloped in the profound silence of shared grief that slowly morphed into purposeful resolve. Jackson thought of the countless lives touched by Mandela's wisdom, envisioned the circle of influence that radiated outwards from this quiet bungalow to the community it served. In that moment, Jackson realized Mandela's legacy was not bound by the past, but propelled into the future. Mandela's essence, so deeply woven throughout this home and the hearts of those who loved him, became the beacon that Jackson needed to guide his path. Where injustice sought to break him, Mandela's enduring light gave him the strength to rebuild a larger house of justice that could accommodate all. Defined by a roof made not of timber and shingle, but of tolerance and unity, Jackson knew what had to come next. Through pain, Mandela's story would become the catalyst for systemic change, the spark to ignite the righteous fight against prejudice. In doing so, Mandela's legacy would not only endure, but flourish, a living testament that the fight for justice could temper not only the soul, but the world itself. The afternoon sun painted streaks of gold across Mandela's beloved garden, where roses stubbornly bloomed against the onset of autumn. Jackson stood among them, a silhouette against the backdrop of vibrant petals, drawing strength from the beauty that his father had lovingly nurtured. Every blossom was a testament to Mandela's patience and care, each petal a coded message of his determination to find beauty amidst chaos. As Jackson turned away from the garden, footsteps crunched on the gravel, a sound he'd know anywhere. His sister Annika approached, her face a mirror of grief and rage, twin emotions simmering alas beneath the surface. Anna had flown in from New York, dropping everything to be here. She offered a silent embrace, the warmth of balm against the cold void left by their father's absence. Jackson, she began, her voice pulling him back from the brink of his reverie. I got in touch with a few civil rights activists. They're ready to turn this tragedy into a real movement. Jackson nodded, comforted by Annika's proactive resolve, a trait she'd inherited from their father. It was as if Mandela's spirit infused every thought and action, guiding them from beyond the veil of death. But how do we do this without him? Jackson murmured, the question a reflection of his deepest insecurity. Anna's response was swift, measured by a certainty that only siblings who shared the same roots could possess. Because he taught us how, we carry him with us always. His fight isn't finished, it's just begun through us. Her words resonated, anchoring Jackson amidst the tumult. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of the journey ahead, he found solace in the simple truth that Mandela's teachings were woven into their very being. Their shared moment of silent resolve was broken by the arrival of Pastor Breyer, a beacon of moral leadership who had shepherded the local community through countless trials. The pastor moved with quiet purpose, his presence a comforting reminder of the collective support that underscored their grief. Sheriff Jackson Annika, he greeted, his tone soothing yet firm, imbued with an unspoken promise of solidarity. Thank you for coming so quickly, Jackson replied, appreciating the pastor's support. In these troubling times, Pastor Breyer placed a hand tenderly on Jackson's shoulder, his touch both calming and galvanizing. "I've spoken with city officials and community leaders," he said. "They're ready to support initiatives that aim to dismantle racial bias within our institutions. This tragedy won't be in vain, son. It'll be the keystone for the bridges we need to build." Jackson inhaled deeply, absorbing the significance of these words. Despite the daunting nature of the road ahead, hope flickered within him like a candle in a drafty room, fragile yet enduring. His gaze met the pastor's, and in that exchange, an unspoken understanding cemented their shared resolve. The trio began discussing plans for a community meeting, a gathering to galvanize collective grief into purposeful action. It was here, amidst the echoes of their conversations, that the first seeds of a movement took root. They outlined initiatives for enhancing cultural sensitivity training and initiating forums that would invite dialogue between law enforcement and the community, a two-way street towards reconciliation. As the sun began its descent into the horizon, the garden's golden hues deepened to amber. Jackson felt surrounded by the strength of his sister, the pastor, and the community that was prepared to rise up in the face of injustice. His father's garden, a testament to Mandela's enduring patience and hope, now transformed into an echo of that enduring legacy. The true depth of a legacy is measured not only in the lives it touches, but in the actions it inspires. The true depth of a legacy is measured not only in the lives it touches, but in the actions it inspires. "You know," Jackson said quietly, drawing Anaka and Pastor Breyer close, "we may not have anticipated this journey, but we can't look back. We must see this through for him and for every soul demanding justice like he did." In the fading light, the garden seemed to whisper back its unanimous agreement. The rustle of leaves, a symphony of resilience and hope. A new chapter was beginning, not in darkness, but in determined defiance to change their world, one step at a time. The town hall buzzed with an electric undercurrent of anticipation. Rows of chairs faced a modest makeshift stage where a single microphone stood poised to amplify voices long left unheard. The crammed hall was a patchwork of faces, old, young, black, white, all gathered with a singular aim: justice for Mandela and reform for their fractured community. Jackson stood at the back observing the sea of individuals who had come together despite their differences. There were families with tired, hopeful eyes, students wearing t-shirts emblazoned with Mandela's image, and elders who remembered the marches of the civil rights movement. In their unity, Jackson saw a reflection of his father's spirit, a call to action that transcended time and circumstance. Mary Jenkins, the witness from that fateful night, was the first to take the stage. Her voice, though small, carried the tone of someone who would not be cowed by fear or pressure. Mandela Johnson was more than a neighbor. He was a beacon of light in our community, she began, her words charged with equal parts sorrow and determination. "It's time for us as a community to speak up for him and for each one of us." Her rallying cry sent ripples through the crowd, a galvanizing pulse that prickled skin and stirred hearts. One by one, people approached the microphone, their testimonies weaving a tapestry of shared pain and a collective vision for change. Here was a community acknowledging the scars of the past, eager to turn them into blueprints for a more just future. A young teacher stepped forward, her voice tremulous yet fierce. "We must educate ourselves and our children. Prejudices aren't born, they're taught. Let's break this cycle once and for all." Her words settled heavily over the audience, a clear directive that inspired quiet nods of agreement. Next came an older man, one who had lived through the civil rights protests of the 60s. His wrinkled hands gripped the edges of the podium with the careful reverence of someone carrying fragile cargo. Memories of struggle and triumph interspersed. "Across decades, our actions," he said, voice rich with history, "they ripple outward just as Mandela's life ripples through this room today. We owe it to him, to ourselves, and to the generations to come to ensure these ripples spark change, not fade into silence." Through it all, Jackson remained rooted at the edge of the assembly, absorbing each story like a vow, a contract with his conscience to uphold the pledges being made under this roof. These promises were now his, their collective responsibility etched into his soul. Anna joined him, her presence a soothing balm in the tumult of emotion swirling inside of him. She squeezed his arm softly, whispering, "We're doing this, Jackson. We're really doing this." He nodded, the words catching in his throat. Unable to voice the tempest of emotions, but he didn't need to. The room spoke for him through each resolute face he saw and every cry for justice that reverberated through the air. As the meeting drew to a close, Pastor Breyer ascended the stage, his figure calm amid the gathered storm. "Let us leave here tonight not just as individuals," he exhorted, "but as a united front. We have the power to birth a new era of justice. Let's not think of it as a dream, but as a destination." Applause erupted, swelling the space with an optimism that had been absent too long. The echoes reached outside the hall, flowing into the streets where Mandela once walked, where he should still be walking today. In that moment, Jackson understood Mandela's true legacy. It wasn't encapsulated merely by his life for death, but, amplified by the community he had inspired to stand tall, unified against the current of injustice. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an oath renewed with every word, every tear, every uplifted hand. As the throng began to disperse, Jackson felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had not gathered for a mere event, but to ignite a revolution of conscience, one that would echo into the very bones of Birmingham and beyond. In stepping into this new dawn, they carried the strength of Mandela with them, a warrior forever fighting through those who dared to dream of a future unshackled by the chains of the past. The journey ahead was long, yet their strides felt assured, each step a tribute to the man who had sparked their resolve. Mandela Johnson, father, leader, an unyielding symbol of hope. The following days plunged the sheriff's office into a maelstrom of scrutiny and self-reflection. An internal investigation had been initiated, a complex tapestry wrought from the threads of justice, transparency, and the desperate need for accountability. As the appointed mediator, Ellen Marshall returned, bringing with her a team of investigators, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Together, they entered the precinct, a sterile dance of protocol and professionalism, bound by a mutual understanding of the stakes that hung in balance. The corridors, once familiar, now bristled with an undercurrent of tension. Officers who wore stoic facades met them, their formality a thin veneer over the rowing uncertainty beneath. Jackson accompanied Ellen, his stride matching hers down the hallways that echoed with unspoken judgments and unyielding scrutiny. The mood was somber, a marked departure from the usual bustle they had known. Today, walls that had witnessed countless briefings were being repurposed to bear witness to one of the most crucial audits in the department's history. In the conference room, an assemblage of officers and staff awaited. Seated like somber jurors before them, they filled the space with restless energy. A sea of blue tasked with the protection and service of their community, now marred by an act that fractured the very society they swore to uphold. Ellen began with steely resolve, her voice cutting through the silence with the precision of a scalpel. "We are here to understand, identify, and eliminate the systemic deficiencies that led to the incident involving Mr. Mandela Johnson. This isn't merely an exercise in procedural examination. It is a call to fundamentally assess our operational and ethical framework." An officer shifted uncomfortably, the weight of collective eyes bearing down on him. "With all due respect, how does this help us now?" His voice held the slightest tremor, a note of defensiveness, barely hidden beneath the veneer of professionalism. Jackson stepped forward, grounding himself as the room focused intently on their sheriff, a man torn between duty and personal grief, because understanding is the first step towards change. He replied plainly, each word a pulse of raw earnest intention. "We owe it to Mandela, to everyone affected, to uncover and confront these failures." A ripple of assent followed, murmured acknowledgments from those who understood that change required dismantling the complacency that had settled like dust upon their ideals. Slowly, conversations began to unearth biases, systemic blind spots that had festered unchecked, perpetuating a cycle of injustice. One senior officer, seasoned by years in the force, spoke up. There's a culture that's developed, subtle, not overt, but it's there, shaped by old ways, by assumptions, that belong to a bygone era. We've ignored it until now. His admission resonated, tolling in the aftermath like a solemn bell. Identifying fractures long concealed, heads nodded around the room, acknowledging the specter of unexamined practices that had come back to haunt them all. Ellen took notes meticulously, her pen a silent witness to the breadth and depth of confessions laid bare. This wasn't just an inventory of errors. It was a catalyst to reform and redefine what it meant to serve and to protect. We will institute mandatory bias training, Ellen stated, marking a foundation for future growth. But more than that, we will listen to each other and most importantly to our community. In that room, a new hope began to take shape. A commitment to inclusivity and perspective unhindered by entrenched preconceptions. Walls that had seemed imposing softened as dialogue replaced silence. Each conversation a promise to Mandela, a vow for truth's unwavering presence amid their ranks. As the meeting concluded, officers dispersed, the gravity of the task palpable between them. Yet amongst the challenges lay an undeniable will to rise, resilient, reborn into roles as guardians of trust. Not just enforcers of the law, but architects of peace and equity. Jackson lingered, feeling palpable exhaustion weigh heavily upon him. Ellen nodded in understanding, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It's a start, Jackson, and that's more than we had yesterday. Indeed, it was just the beginning, a fledgling stride towards integrity and healing. What lay ahead was still uncertain, a horizon obscured by the pain of the past. But, as they departed the precinct, stepping back into the crimson-tinged day, Jackson felt the faintest flicker of reassurance. Within their cumulative shadows, Mandela's memory loomed, enduring and ceaseless, propelling them forward in their quest for justice, one definitive step at a time. The piercing sound of a digital notification shattered the hushed atmosphere of Jackson's office, drawing all eyes to the screen. The email subject line flashed ominously in the dim room, urgent new evidence footage attached. It was the digital harbinger of a storm they had anticipated yet feared just as intently. Without delay, Jackson clicked on the link, his heart a metronomic witness to the building tension within his chest. The grainy footage began playing, every pixel a stark memory bound to shake their core. Captured by Mary Jenkins' smartphone from her living room window. The video chronicled tragedy in harrowing detail. It revealed Mandela dressed in his familiar cardigan and cap, confronted by the officers. Their voices, filled with misguided authority, clashed against the calm dignity his father always exuded. Visceral and unedited, the footage was a revelation, an unguarded account of the last moments of Mandela's life. Whispers filled the room, somber breaths punctuating the air as the reality of the video seeped into their consciousness. The hierarchy of authority, so often adhered to, was rendered obsolete in the face of an undeniable truth. Mandela had been unarmed, peaceful, and yet ruthlessly subdued. Ellen Marshall, seated next to Jackson, studied the video with an intensity that bordered on reverence, understanding its potential to catalyze seismic shifts within their investigation and beyond. "This changes everything," she murmured, not taking her eyes off the screen. The words wove through Jackson's mind, resonant and clear. The footage concluded, leaving behind a silence thicker than any witnessed before. For Jackson, it was a culmination of personal loss, professional duty, and moral reckoning. His father's serene face haunted each frame, a constant, albeit painful, reminder of the stakes entwined in his quest for justice. Ellen was the first to speak, her tone resolute yet tempered with gravity. "We need to release this to the public. Their trust hinges on transparency. It's imperative we show them what really happened." Jackson inhaled deeply, grappling with the implications of this decision. To reveal the footage meant to relive the pain, to lay bare the intimate suffering of their family. But behind the burden of personal sacrifice lay a glimmer of hope. One that promised justice and reformation. "I agree," Jackson replied, his voice steady with determination. "It's the right thing to do for my father, for the community, and for the integrity of the department." With their decision made, Ellen quickly orchestrated a press release, ensuring the footage would reach the eyes of the public unfiltered and honest. As the hours crept by, news outlets began broadcasting the video, the airwaves filled with an omnipotent sense of urgency and disbelief. Around televisions in homes and workplaces, viewers gasped and grieved. The footage sparking a collective outrage that transcended geographical and racial divides. Mandela Johnson's name, united with the harrowing images of his final moments, echoed across the nation, igniting renewed calls for justice and reform. In response, streets swelled once more with protesters, their combined voices a formidable roar that shook the foundations of both justice and peace. Signs emblazoned with Mandela's name punctuated the air, their messages clear: justice delayed, justice denied. No peace without accountability. Change begins with action. Jackson watched from his office window where streams of people marched unwaveringly forward. He absorbed their fervor, the courage in their steps resonating as the stalwart warriors sought change beneath the teetering shadow of oppression. Beside him, Ellen sighed, a subtle venting of the pressure and anticipation encircling them both. "Mandel is watching Jackson," she assured him, her gaze meeting his with solidarity. "He'd be proud of all you're doing." Jackson closed his eyes, envisioning his father's face, ageless and wise, a memory kindled by love and fueled by justice. In these moments, Jackson felt a truth wrap around him, a visceral confirmation of his journey, ignited by the flickering promise of justice fulfilled. In sharing Mandela's story, Jackson was opening a gateway to transformation, compelling all who sought to remember prejudice must die so humanity can truly live. And though the road before them remained steep, they were moving forward, armed with courage carved from heartache, ready to redefine their legacy, one steadfast truth at a time. The courtroom felt more like an arena, reverberating with the ambient noise of spectators, the shuffling of papers, and an undercurrent of tension so profound it seemed to throb within the walls themselves. The air was thick, charged with expectation and the palpable weight of the task ahead. The search for truth amidst layers of deception and deceit. All were gathered to witness the unraveling of a tragedy that had become a symbol for far greater narratives. Among them, Jackson sat quietly, his posture betraying nothing but composed resolve. Yet the gravity of the unfolding events pressed on him, linking him inexorably to every spoken word, every procedural nuance. As the legal proceedings commenced, the prosecution meticulously laid out their case, society's pain laid bare through a tapestry of detailed accounts and forensic evidence pieced together with the methodical precision of a solved puzzle. Yet amidst these formal entanglements, it was the testimony's most anticipated, the human touch amid procedural stiffness that would come to define this trial. Mary Jenkins took the stand first, the courtroom falling silent, awash with the gravity. Her voice commanded. Her testimony was both a rebuke and a beacon, shining harsh light on the actions of the officers involved. Her recounting of Mandela's last moments sent ripples through the courtroom, an emotional reverberation of a tragedy too profound to ignore. They didn't see him, she trembled, managing to hold her composure. They didn't see his humanity, only a threat that wasn't real. They acted before they thought, and because of that, we lost a man who was everything to this community. Her words hung suspended in the room, as tangible as the sensation of loss that imprisoned them all. Then came the officer's turn, a chance to try and justify the actions that had sparked nationwide outrage. From the stand, Officer Bean shifted uneasily, his demeanor juxtaposed somewhere between regret and defiance, the internal conflict within him and uneasy discord. It was chaotic. Beeman began, his words careful, deliberated. We acted on what we believed to be reliable information, and in doing so made a terrible mistake. The tension in the courtroom tightened, a collective intake of breath audible as many leaned just a fraction closer, straining to catch the nuances of his confession. "We didn't see him," Bean continued, echoing Mary's poignant assessment. "Now we live with not just what we've done, but more importantly, what we couldn't undo." His acknowledgment, though belated, resonated within the chamber, a stark reminder of the frailty of human decisions weighed against the magnitude of their consequences. The courtroom remained a symphony of dissected claims and counterclaims, where each admission danced on the precipice of redemption or condemnation. Jackson's eyes bore into Beam's, searching for any semblance of remorse beyond the rehearsed words. The burden of grief welled within him, a pressure tide bound to the truth, bearing the weight of 1,000 unshed hairs. Observing from the gallery, the faces of the community unified in their anticipation of justice, their presence a powerful testament to Mandela's impact on their lives. Each personal story woven together into a unified cry for clarity against the backdrop of systemic transgressions. Throughout, Ellen Marshall maintained her unwavering resolve as she interrogated each witness, using their narratives not just as testaments, but as catalysts, demanding introspection and reform. Her strategy was unyielding yet embodying an empathy that reflected the broader human struggle against institutional failings. As court adjourned that day, those present filed out with heavy hearts, returning to homes, abuzz with troubled conversations and guarded hope. The atmosphere outside brimmed with an urgency, a burning desire for definitive answers in a world where ambiguity had to often mask the injustices of the past. For Jackson, the day's proceedings were not merely steps toward closure, but a continuation of Mandela's own journey, one irrevocably intertwined with his own. There was no simple resolution. Beyond the legalities lay a deeper truth waiting to emerge, a truth that would honor not only his father's legacy, but every individual who had known the sting of prejudice, dressed in the disguise of authority. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Jackson knew that despite the darkness that marked their path, they were moving inexorably toward the dawn of justice Mandela deserved. And in his father's enduring memory, he vowed to fortify each step with resolve that transcended even grief. This trial was just the beginning, an awakening to see justice served as the cornerstone upon which to build a future unmarred by the sins of the past. The aftermath of the courtroom revelation spread through Birmingham like ripples in a pond, touching every corner of the community with a renewed sense of purpose. As the days unfolded, an unexpected unity began to take shape, casting aside the usual divisions and fostering alliances that previously seemed beyond reach. Everywhere people were talking, sometimes in cafes over steaming mugs of coffee, other times on street corners where everyday greetings turned into meaningful exchange. In the heart of this burgeoning movement was Tasha Lee, a young community organizer known for her indefatigable spirit and unwavering courage. She was a firebrand, her presence unmistakably commanding as she convened a meeting at a local community center. The space was modest, but it buzzed with the unmistakable energy of transformation, an energy cultivated by the scores of people gathered, eager to channel their collective outrage into productive action. Tasha stood at the front, her gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd, a mosaic of ages and backgrounds, united under the banner of a shared cause. Her voice rang out, clear and passionate, forging connections through the promise of change. "We've all seen what can happen when we let fear and ignorance guide our actions," she began, her words a clarion call resounding through the room. "Now is our time to rewrite the narrative. We are the authors of our future." Her declaration stirred something deeply rooted in those present, kindling determination where despair had lingered. In this room, differences faded, eclipsed by a sense of purpose that transcended skin and circumstance. It was a shaking off of the chains that had bound their voices, and in that emerging freedom, they found solidarity. Jackson arrived late, slipping quietly through the doors as Tasha wrapped up her speech. A few attendees turned to acknowledge him, nodding with the respectful recognition granted to someone who had stood firmly on the front line of this fight for justice, even as it cost him dearly. He joined Annika, sinking into the chair beside her with a sigh that spoke of both exhaustion and resolve. Naka nudged him lightly. "You missed her opening speech." "It was incredible," she whispered, admiration glowing in her eyes. "I'll catch your next one," Jackson replied with a weary smile. But his gaze was already on Tasha, who now facilitated an open forum where dialogue flowed freely, an exchange of ideas as vibrant as it was profound. Topics ranged from police reform to educational initiatives, each voice carving a piece of the future they envisioned, one where understanding usurped prejudice and justice supplanted indifference. Amid the discussion, a petite woman with silver-streaked hair raised her hand, her voice unexpectedly confident. "We need to create spaces where real conversations happen," she suggested. "Spaces where we face uncomfortable truths, where healing begins." Her insight was met with murmurs of agreement, an acknowledgement of the need to confront the shadows lurking within collective and individual consciences. Jackson felt a swell of pride and responsibility, watching as this movement eclipsed the pain of loss, transforming grief into a vehicle for healing. These were Mandela's people, the community he had served, not because he sought gratitude, but because he believed in the power of unyielding compassion. Leaving the meeting, Jackson walked alongside Tasha, the cool night air a refreshing counterpoint to the intensity of their collective momentum. They spoke quietly, sharing thoughts on the evening's proceedings and the road ahead. "I'm grateful for what you're doing, Tasha," Jackson said, sincerity anchoring each word. "People are listening, they're ready for change. Mandela would have been proud of how you're leading this charge." Tasha paused, turning to meet his gaze with a warmth that belied her fierce determination. "Your father set the foundation, we're just building on it. This is as much his legacy as it is ours, Jackson, and with leaders like you, we're going to see it through." They parted ways, but the connection forged amid shared purpose lingered. A reminder that they were not alone in their pursuit of justice. This was more than a movement, it was a path etched into the fabric of their lives, a journey towards reconciliation, illuminated by the deeds of a man whose spirit continued to guide them. In every step, every meeting, every pledge to fight for equitable change, they honored Mandela. He was the anchor and the beacon, charting a course toward a horizon drenched in the promise of better days, a future defined by unity, resilience, and a shared commitment to justice for all. Behind the closed doors of the precinct, conversations buzzed in hushed tones, laden with the weight of recent revelations. The officers, once wrapped in the immunity of routine, now moved with the discernible caution, as if every thought was circumscribed by the looming presence of accountability. Jackson navigated these corridors deliberately, his steps muffled by the burden of introspection. He felt the acute awareness of every gaze upon him when he entered the meeting room where selected members of his team awaited. It was a different kind of briefing today, one that edged toward introspective reckoning rather than external enforcement. As Jackson settled into his chair, the men and women before him represented not just colleagues, but a cross-section of society grappling with profound questions. The tension was palpable, a tacit recognition of legacy figures standing at the precipice of change. He indicated for them to speak, encouraging honesty within this new landscape they were learning to inhabit. He didn't want to engage them in conversation until they had an optimistic, better idea. Officer Simmons broke the initial silence, his voice tentative yet cloaked in sincerity. "We're struggling, Sheriff. With everything that's happened, it's hard to face the community, knowing we're part of a system that's caused such pain." Jackson nodded, appreciating the courage required to admit fault in a room where vulnerability had often been mistaken for weakness. "We've all struggled, Simmons," he affirmed, locking eyes with each officer in turn. "But it's in owning our part, however small or large, that we begin to change the narrative. Our role is to protect, yes, but also to serve, and we owe our community nothing less than transparency and genuine commitment. A ripple of understanding passed through the room, a nod here, a sigh there, as officers processed the shared intent to build bridges. Uncertain though they might be, yet even amidst the uncertainty, it was clear that the quest for redemption had intertwined their individual fates with a collective aspiration. In this space of honesty, Officer Padmore, one of their most seasoned members, leaned forward, his demeanor reflecting years of internalizing the harsh realities of the streets. "I grew up facing prejudice myself, Sheriff," he admitted quietly, uncovering a truth he rarely shared. "But somewhere along the way, I buried that part of me to fit in here. It's time to remember who I am and what this badge should stand for." His admission resonated deeply, nestling into the spaces where silence had once reigned. It was a shared epiphany, the realization that biases could blind even those charged with the vision to safeguard others. "That's where it begins, Padmore," Jackson encouraged, the warmth in his tone a testament to the empathy he felt. "Change doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in moments like these where we recognize and actively work against our ingrained assumptions." With this acknowledgement, the room relaxed into an earnest conversation, a tapestry of concerns and commitments that welcomed humility, understanding, and new perspectives. Here was the dialogue Jackson had envisioned in the wake of Mandela's death. One where voices rose not in confrontation, but in unity for a common cause. As the discussion unfolded, a renewed clarity emerged, rooted in the collective acknowledgement of their shortcomings and pledges to forge a more compassionate future. Together, they began to devise the frameworks for training that emphasized humanity over hierarchy, for community outreach programs that positioned empathy at their heart, and for transparency efforts that left no room for discord. Hours passed in these exchanges, and by the time the meeting adjourned, a renewed purpose infused their resolves. They were no longer simply officers in uniform, but custodians of justice that bore the weight of Mandela's legacy, a legacy they were determined to honor through action, understanding, and unwavering commitment. Leaving the meeting room under the dim glow of evening lights, Jackson felt a new energy, a subtle shift that signified more than just talk, but a declaration of intent. For within these walls, change was germinating, nurtured by the seeds sown in honest vulnerability and reckoned truths. As he stepped out into the night, the stars emerged, a constellation mirrored by the lights of Birmingham, soon to be joined by the eyes of a world awaiting the outcome of this transformation. This marked a new beginning, not just for the precinct, but for a community interwoven with all the aspirations and dreams that Mandela had once fostered. It was hope renewed and resilient, shining like a beacon for all who dared fight for truth together. The flash of cameras was relentless, a staccato of bright explosions capturing the tense anticipation that hung heavy in the air. Sheriff Jackson stood behind the lectern, a row of microphones angled like eyes, watching and waiting for the words that would either build bridges or widen chasms within the heart of the city. This was more than a press conference. It was an overture to accountability, a public reckoning that demanded truth and transparency. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his father's legacy on his shoulders, a legacy that extended beyond personal grief into the very fabric of a community seeking justice. As reporters jostled for position, pens poised, Jackson adjusted the microphone, grounding himself in the silent promise he made to Mandela to stand resolute in the face of systemic adversity. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice steadfast, underpinned by the conviction of his mission. "The events of the past weeks have revealed critical flaws in our justice system, flaws that cost my father, Mandela Johnson, his life. Today, we take steps to confront these issues directly. It's about restoring trust and ensuring that every person in this community feels protected, valued, and heard." The crowd shifted, the collective tension palpable. Here was a sheriff, not as an authoritarian figure, but as a son and a leader, walking the tightrope of change. Jackson was acutely aware of the fragile hope hinged on his words, burning like a beacon of potential renewal. A journalist raised a hand, her expression earnest yet skeptical. A voice for the skeptical hearts tuned in across the nation. Sheriff Jackson, what specific actions is your office taking to address racial biases within the department? Nodding, Jackson dove into the heart of their strategy. A comprehensive plan built on introspection and action. We're implementing mandatory BIAS training and establishing a community oversight board to support and scrutinize police activities with full transparency. It's essential to develop an open channel between our officers and the communities they serve. And his words were met with a cacophony of clacking keyboards and scribbling pens. Each action a transmutation of grief into the promise of reform. But more than this, these were seeds being planted, stories being crafted, each containing threads of accountability intertwined with a renewed dedication to justice. As Jackson outlined further initiatives, diversified recruitment efforts, and the inclusion of mental health professionals and law enforcement strategies, he felt the mood of the room suddenly shift. The air, though still thick with trepidation, shimmered with a burgeoning confidence, a realization that maybe, just maybe, this was the harbinger of change. Another reporter's voice pierced the ambience, their question cutting yet reflective. Sheriff, what does justice for Mandela look like to you personally? Caught off guard by the rawness of the inquiry, Jackson paused, images of his father standing, tall and proud amidst his roses, teaching Jackson how to patiently prune branches for maximum bloom flashed through his mind. The all-encompassing warmth of Mandela's spirit enveloped him, strengthening his resolve. Justice for Mandela, Jackson answered, his voice imbued with the weight of loss and a father's whispered dreams, is ensuring that his story emboldens pathways to truth and reconciliation, preventing another senseless tragedy. It means forging a legacy rooted in compassion and fairness, not only for him, but for everyone touched by this pain. The sincerity of his words seemed to resonate deeply, creating an echo that transcended the walls of media scrutiny, sparking dialogues throughout the city and beyond. Here was hope, vulnerable yet tenaciously clinging to the possibility of healing. As the conference waned and questions gave way to reflective silence, Jackson remained at the podium, grounded by an overwhelming mix of emotions. He was peppered with flashes and lingering gazes as people, both journalists and civilians, processed the enormity of what lay before them. They were embarking on a journey not just of systemic reform, but towards a collective conscience rekindled by the flames of tragedy. When he finally stepped away from the podium, he was met by Ellen, who had observed the proceedings with a keen eye, admiration evident in her gaze. "You handled that beautifully, Jackson," she remarked, her words like a balm for his weary soul. Mandela would be proud. Jackson nodded, turning to face the open sky and the city beyond, a canvas on which their future was slowly taking shape. Here, surrounded by the wake of his commitment, he realized that the path to justice may be fraught with challenges, but step by step, word by word, they were paving Mandela's journey into the annals of change. As Birmingham began its quiet transition into evening, a day marked not by routine, but by hope, the silent vows made under the sun matured under the stars, testament to the unflagging spirit of resistance. And in those steadfast vows lay the promise of a community determined to rise, resilient and unbroken, guided by the unwavering light of justice that Mandela had illuminated with his sacrifice. The sun cast long, dappled shadows across the weathered benches in Kelly Ingram Park, where the community had gathered once more. Today was different. However, today, they met not just to grieve, but to strategize, to hear voices that spoke of solidarity and humanity, void of uniforms, yet full of courage. Among them was an unexpected ally, Detective Eliza Carter, a respected member of the force with a reputation for integrity and fairness. Eliza stepped up with quiet grace, her presence a breath of fresh air amidst the familiar sea of faces marked by grief and hope. She wasn't here to plate or obscure the truth. Her intention was clear: to bridge the chasm between law enforcement and the community, forging understanding through the courtesy of shared humanity. As murmurs subsided, Eliza addressed the gathering with the sincerity of someone who had walked the tightrope between duty and morality. I'm here because I believe in justice, not just as a concept, but as a lived reality for everyone, she began, her voice unwavering amidst the whispers of a breeze that rustled the autumn leaves around them. What happened to Mandela was not just a failure of duty, it was a betrayal of our community. Her words hung heavy, yet within them lay the seed of change. Here was a woman willing to confront her own institution's failings, a rare courage that demanded respect even from those who were skeptical. I'm not just a detective. I'm part of this community, too, Eliza continued, her gaze sweeping over familiar and unfamiliar faces alike. To rebuild, we need more than talk. We need action, transparency, and trust. That means mutual accountability from all sides. The crowd responded with nods of agreement, their faces reflecting a blend of cautious optimism and hard-won skepticism. They listened intently, recognizing that Eliza's words were not hollow promises, but a pledge to shift the paradigm. A hand went up. A young man? Malik, his voice hesitant yet strong. How do we hold officers accountable? More importantly, how do you intend to change the department's culture? Eliza paused, carefully crafting her response. It starts with being transparent, exposing the shadows where prejudice and complacency thrive. We need independent oversight and community liaison officers who can voice your concerns directly, ensuring that your voices inform our practices. But change also depends on education, teaching new recruits that their duty extends beyond the law to embody justice. In that moment, her commitment to reform resonated, casting a net of unity over the assembly. It was a declaration that the path to equality was through collective effort where hearts and minds open to dialogue, not discord. As discussions continued, communal conversations erupted around her, instances of cooperative dialogues taking shape, each branching out into plans for community forums, restorative justice initiatives, and educational workshops, all aimed at nurturing an environment where future Mandela Johnsons wouldn't just survive, but thrive. Eliza stepped away, her position at the forefront gracefully inherited by Tasha, who seamlessly tied the themes together, echoing Eliza's sentiments while expanding upon them with vibrant energy. Tasha's ability to inspire action from impassioned planning was evident. She spoke of the need for continuous collaboration with law enforcement, ensuring that community-police relations rebuild atop a blueprint co-written by all stakeholders. Jackson observed from the periphery, buoyed by a spirit of solidarity he hadn't seen in years. What had begun with personal loss was now a rally for justice, not just for his father, but for every life impacted by injustice. In Eliza, they had found an ally, a voice within the department willing to challenge the very systems she was part of. Her presence inspired new respect within the community, proof that the seeds of change were being sown, even within the precincts, steel and stone, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an amber glow over the gathered crowd. Jackson approached Eliza, gratitude and resolve reflecting in his expression. Thank you for standing with us. Your courage means everything. Eliza met his gaze, her own determination mirrored in his eyes. This isn't just your fight, Jackson. We're all in this together. Mandela's story is now a beacon for us all. They stood in silence for a moment, allowing the weight of their shared mission to sink in. Here in the heart of Birmingham, a city reclaimed by hope amid struggle, they found common ground, each committed to seeing justice bloom where sorrow had once sown despair. Together, they turned to the future, each step forward a testament to Mandela's enduring impact, a commitment to a legacy that revealed itself not just in actions, but in every heart, determined to see change realized. As the stars emerged, casting light over a community resilient and resolute, a path lay before them, a path they would walk, together, emboldened by the courage to transform hope into reality for once and for always. The following weeks unfolded like a tapestry unraveling at the seams. Each day, a new piece added to the complex puzzle of justice and reform. Jackson knew that the path ahead was marred by legal complexities where loopholes threatened to undermine their efforts. The fight for justice was no longer just about hearts and minds. It was becoming a battle of wits fought in the corridors of power where influence threatened to eclipse integrity. Within his office, the weight of this new battle pressed heavily upon him. Legal documents piled high, a testament to the intricate dance of policy and law that played out on paper. Each page seemed to pulse with potential betrayal. Whispers of a system that resisted change like a living organism intent on preserving itself. Ellen was there, steadfast and unyielding. Her meticulously organized notes juxtaposed against Jackson's chaotic desk. As the district attorney, her role was crucial, navigating the legal labyrinth to ensure the culpable face consequences. "These officers have a well-funded defense," she remarked, a grim acknowledgement of the formidable opposition they faced. "We have to anticipate every angle, every loophole they plan to exploit." Jackson nodded, feeling the strain of David facing Goliath. Behind every page of legal jargon lay an achingly human story demanding resolution. His father's legacy boiled down to cases and precedents, names on paper instead of faces weathered by time and adversity. "We need to cut him off at the pass," he agreed, determination etching itself into each word. "Find those oversights and ensure they don't become escape routes." The office door creaked open, revealing Anna, her presence a welcome anchor in the storm. Her eyes, fierce and unwavering, reflected the same fire that drove her brother. "I've been talking to civil rights lawyers. They're willing to help pro bono. They see this case a landmark for systemic reform." Her news brought a ray of hope, sparking a renewed sense of possibility amid their pragmatic strategizing. Annika's connections were the bridge between their struggle and the national spotlight, a coalition of minds and hearts alike in their pursuit of justice. Over the following days, Ellen and Jackson along with Anna delved into the intricate world of legal maneuvering, building a case to combat the mountain of precedents that shielded impunity. They pored over depositions, dissecting testimonies that could cement their narrative or unravel it entirely. Each word a potential linchpin in their fight for Mandela's dignity. Meanwhile, outside the sterile world of legal machinations, the community continued to galvanize. Inspired by Tasha and Eliza's call to action, workshops and panels emerged, drawing residents and activists together in spaces filled with cathartic conversation and tangible plans for reform. Schools began incorporating lessons of equity and justice into their curriculum, planting seeds of understanding in future generations. A grassroots revolution in the hearts and minds of the city. One evening, as Ellen prepared to leave, Jackson paused, staring out into the darkened streets below, his silhouette a silent witness to the city's pulse. "We won't let him become just another statistic, Ellen. We owe him that." She touched his shoulder, the warmth of her hand, a comforting reminder of their shared mission. "We won't stop until justice is served, Jackson, for Mandel and for everyone who needs this win." Her promise hung in the air, a silent pact against the indifference of legal bureaucracy. Together, they were more than just officers of the court. They were advocates, stewards of Mandela's legacy, warriors against apathy and obstruction. As days turned to weeks, the legal proceedings took shape. Yet, the opposition's attempts to water down their claims never ceased. They sought to obscure facts, twist narratives to fit their convenient truths. But Jackson, buoyed by the collective strength of his allies and the unyielding light of his father's memory, refused to let injustice slip through legislative crack. In each hearing, every motion filed and argued, in every sleepless night spent, strategizing, they found strength not from the certainty of victory, for that remained elusive, but from the courage to fight for something greater than themselves. In persistence, they found a purpose unchanged by setbacks, a resolve steeled by the understanding that true victory would mitigate not only their sorrows, but catalyze a wave of reform. For Mandela, for the hopes carried by each march and meeting, the echoes of his enduring influence resonated with the promise of justice yet to be served, a testament not only to his memory, but to the hearts united by unyielding resolve to rise above the rhetoric and into the realm of real change. The night was still, with the air carrying a chill that whispered of approaching winter, as if the world itself was holding its breath in anticipation. The vigil was set to take place under the serene canopy of Kelly Ingram Park, the very heart that had first rallied to Mandela Johnson's name. Tonight, candles would flicker amidst the gathering shadows, casting circles of warm light that danced like echoes of the spirit they honored. The community arrived in a steady stream, their footfalls a soothing rhythm on the cobblestone paths, each step a silent pledge of remembrance and resolution. Jackson stood beneath the expansive oak tree that overlooked the park, its ancient branches cradling the memories of countless gatherings in its boughs. He watched as families huddled together, young children peering curiously at the rising flames, their innocence shielded by the warmth of a shared purpose. Anaka joined him, a soft glow of candle light illuminating her somber features, her eyes reflecting the firelight, the same expressive eyes that seemed capable of seeing both the past's weight and the future's promise. "Look at them all, Jackson," she said quietly, her voice threading through the space between them. "Dad's story has transcended our grief. It's now a part of all of them." In agreement, Jackson wrapped his arm around her, drawing strength from the connection. Here, beneath the steady stars and eternal oak, he felt Mandela's presence in every rustle of leaves, in each flickering flame that pierced the night. The vigil was more than a gathering. It was a renewal of vows taken in the wake of tragedy, a commitment to disrupt cycles of pain with the light of enduring justice. As the crowd settled, Tasha took to the makeshift stage, her voice resonant with emotion and unspoken gratitude for the lives Mandela had touched. Her presence, commanding yet inclusive, created a sacred space where community and continuity intersected, where healing began anew. "We are here to honor Mandela's legacy, a legacy of resilience and change," she began, her words wrapping around them like a worn yet vibrant quilt. "Tonight we say his name not in sorrow, but in strength, ensuring that his spirit continues to inspire our steps forward." Her words awakened a fervor within the crowd, gentle murmurs of agreement flowing through the assembly like an unirrigated stream. The candles were passed around, tips igniting with a soft hiss. One by one, flames sprang to life, each one symbolic of Mandela's unwavering light. Accomplishments secured not with force, but through quiet strength, genuine empathy, and an unrelenting quest for justice. Jackson observed this tapestry of fire weave its way through the park like constellations reflected on earth. Each candle held aloft a beacon of hope and a promise of transformation. Nearby, Eliza stood beside a group of young activists, their determination reflected in her encouraging smile, a tacit admission that authentic change was indeed possible. Mary Jenkins appeared next to Jackson, her presence a comforting reminder of that fateful night now channeled into a legacy redeemed. "I remember him lighting a candle each night, praying for peace, for understanding," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of memory and the hope for future redemption. Jackson nodded, recalling the countless nights spent beside Mandela, those candles flickering against the backdrop of his father's steady wisdom. A lighthouse amidst life's persistent storms. It was now their duty, all of them, gathered here, to carry this light onward, to proliferate that cycle of compassion and illumination in the face of adversity. The vigil drew to its close with a unifying silence, each person cocooned in their reflections, alive with the spirit of Mandela's collective call to action. Though the candles would flicker out, they knew the light would persist in their hearts, lighting a path forward, marked by purpose and fortitude. When the last of the wax dripped and the flames surrendered to the night, Jackson turned to the dispersing crowd, deeply moved by their presence. Against the backdrop of a star-ell sky, he found himself whispering a pledge carried on the breath of the night. For you, Dad, always. Here, where Mandela's light united them all, lay the undeniable truth rising like the first blush of dawn. Justice was inevitable through the power of a community united by love, fortified in memory, and driven by a resolute commitment to ensure that his legacy blazes ever onward. The courtroom, accustomed now to intense scrutiny and silent anticipation, had become a crucible, testing not just legal acumen, but the very soul of justice itself. Each day in court had been a trial by fire, a relentless procession of witnesses, an unceasing flood of evidence, and the unvarnished revelation of biases lurking within the system. But today, the mood was different. A heightened tension crackled like static in the air as the trial moved to the closing arguments, a summation of their arduous journey from tragedy toward accountability. Gallery was packed with faces both familiar and anonymous, all unified in their focus on the space between prosecution and defense, where truth battled perception. The air throbbed with silent prayers and unsaid hopes. The verdict of this community lying almost tangibly in the balance. Ellen Marshall stood as the prosecution's representative, her presence as formidable as the truth she wielded. With a poise that bore no misunderstanding, she addressed the jury, her voice carrying the kind of gravitas earned through an unyielding dedication to justice. This trial is not just about the tragic, irreversible loss of Mandela Johnson. Ellen began, her words carefully measured, weaving through the silence like a craftsperson, weaving hope into fabric. It's about confronting the systemic failings that allowed such an atrocity to occur, unchecked and unchallenged. Her eyes locked with each member of the jury, imploring them to see beyond the sterile facts and the loopholes expertly navigated by the defense. Mandela was not merely a victim of circumstance. He was a victim of a system that prioritized prejudice over humanity. The time for change is long overdue. Each sentence was a chain, pulling the jury ever closer to a decision, grounded not in shortcut absolution, but in the tireless pursuit of change. As she concluded, the courtroom echoed with the unspoken understanding of a society poised at the edge of transformation. The defense followed lawyers dressed in expensive suits, well versed in the art of doubt and persuasion. Their arguments wove through gray areas, seeking to humanize officers, though their actions were clear, exploiting loopholes and highlighting the pressure of split-second decisions. Yet, as the defense's arguments unfurled, a steady resilience persisted in the gallery. This wasn't merely a legal contest. It was a crucible where the faulty machinery of precedent met the steely resolve of a community invigorated by Mandela's legacy. Jackson watched from his seat, a silent sentinel at the brink of justice. His heart carried the weight of every testimony given, every tear shed, each applause of support outside the courtroom. This was a fight not for vindication alone, but for reformation, a blueprint for future interactions etched in the ink of his father's sacrifice. As the final words faded, the judge, an imposing figure draped in formal robes, dismissed the jury for deliberation. The atmosphere shifted perceptibly, a collective breath held as they watched the jury file out, entrusted with the fate of the defendants and more symbolically with the future of a community poised for healing. A hush fell over the gallery as they waited, an ephemeral silence charged with anticipation and hope. In those timeless hours, conversations swirled quietly, reflections on the trial's proceedings and its broader implications, poignant in their depth. Across from Jackson, Tasha, and Eliza sat side by side, representatives of a movement that transcended the confines of these courtroom walls. They shared a lingering glance of mutual encouragement, a bond forged in the fires of shared sacrifice and struggle. Time crawled until at last the jury returned, their faces an enigma masking the decision of profound consequence. As they filed back into their seats, the tension in the room escalated to a fever pitch. Every eye turned to absorb whatever conclusion might emerge. A foreperson stood the jury's collective voice and spoke the words that would either shatter hopes or ignite a beacon for change. We find the defendants. In that suspended moment, Jackson felt everything blend. Grief, hope, anticipation into a unified resonance, an embodied prayer for justice, seamlessly tethered to his father's enduring, transformative journey. At the time, Jackson did not. As the verdict's echo permeated the room, a spontaneous wave of emotion coursed through those present. The verdict not just a singular ruling, but a reflection of a community's potential for rebirth. Amidst tears, gasps, and resolute nods, an unspoken vow emerged. A certainty that regardless of today's outcome, Mandela's legacy had ignited flame enough to light the path towards equity and understanding for generations to come. The courtroom fell into a trance-like silence, a collective inhale. The four persons' words hung in the air. Charged with gravity, we find the defendants guilty of manslaughter. The declaration was met with a momentary suspension of time, a pause where disbelief collided with relief, and the gravity of justice grounded them all. A raw wave of emotion crested within the room, breaking into a cacophony of reaction as the realization seeped into the collective consciousness of those present. Tears swelled in the eyes of some, while others exchanged silent gestures of solace and solidarity. Those three stark syllables resonated beyond a mere legal judgment. They were the dawn of accountability, inked by the tears of a community that refused to remain voiceless. From his place, Jackson exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The invisible weight of the trial momentarily lifting from his shoulders. The words echoed in his mind, intertwining with memories of his father's wisdom and warmth. For the first time in what felt like eons, the injustice of Mandela's loss was acknowledged in the eyes of the law, a small yet significant victory in the longing for change. Ellen remained beside him, her outward composure a veil over the tempest of vindication swirling within her. "This is a step, Jackson," she said softly, her voice carrying the strength of shared resilience. "But it's only the beginning." Jackson nodded, understanding the boundless truth in her words. Justice for Mandela was not merely about punishment. It was about ensuring that systems evolved, that prejudice was dismantled brick by brick, preventing another soul from being subjected to the scourge of discrimination masked as law. In the gallery, Anaka embraced Tasha, a mingling of tears on cheeks and whispered promises of continued advocacy. Around them, the community drew closer, those who had rallied since the first steps of their vigil, now confirming the power of unity as an antidote to inequality. The defendants, now convicted, stood silently, faces shadowed by a realization of their actions' inescapability. It was not just their lives that had shifted in that decisive moment, but the lives of many who bore the brunt of their fateful choices. The question now lingered how this judgment would seep into the fabric of both personal and societal redemption. As the proceedings wrapped, Jackson found himself outside the courthouse where the autumn sun filtered through golden leaves, casting ethereal patterns across the steps. Journalists clustered beyond, ready to capture reactions for the world beyond. Birmingham, eager eyes privy to this local yet national reckoning. Facing the assembled crowd, Jackson took a stance at the top of the steps, joined by Tasha, Annika, and Eliza. Their figures, symbolic of the multitude, embodies the fight for justice, carrying Mandela's legacy forward as a mantle, not just among them, but in every heart touched by his journey. Addressing the gathering, Jackson's voice carried the conviction of both hurt and hope. "Today, we found justice in the eyes of the law, but our work is not finished. Change requires vigilance, courage, and community. Let Mandela's story remind us to continue this fight for fairness, for truth, for every life that calls this nation home." His words ignited a robust round of applause, resonating with the cadence of feet marching forward, a harmony that drowned the grief until only resolve remained. This moment was proof that love could indeed conquer hate, and that righteousness was a path paved by each soul committed to walking it. As the crowd began to disperse, energized by the weight of possibilities that the verdict had unveiled, Jackson lingered amidst the echoes of their footsteps. Here was the promise his father had always believed in, a promise upon which generations could build futures unbound by the shackles of their forebears. A gentle zephyr rustled through, whispering of new beginnings, lifting the hair from his brow, and clutching his whispered vow to honor Mandela's legacy, an oath binding him not to the past, but a burgeoning commitment to the ideals of love, justice, and unwavering unity. In that promise, beneath the timeless sky, Jackson found not just an end to this chapter, but the prologue to countless more. Written with the collective courage of those who dared to dream differently, justice had rung its bell with a clarion call that summoned each witness to remember, to reform, and most importantly, to never relent in the pursuit of what was inherently right. The courtroom's resounding verdict had permeated the city, setting off a cascade of reflections and resolutions that extended far beyond the wood-paneled walls. In the days following, Birmingham found itself caught in the throes of a transformation, its streets and sidewalks alive with the determined energy of a community newly awakened to its power. Amidst this reinvigorated spirit, a different battle was brewing. A battle for redemption, ushered in not through force, but by earnest introspection and purposeful dialogue. The city, still reeling from the aftershocks of injustice, now grappled with the challenges of sculpting hope from anger, of demanding change from both within and without. Jackson found himself standing once more before a gathering of supporters and community leaders, this time within the spacious and echoing enclave of a local church that had offered refuge during times of trial and tribulation. The pews were packed with familiar faces, eyes alike with anticipation for what would come next. It was the closing arguments of a different kind, as much a personal essay as it was a manifesto for collective action. He spoke with a renewed fervor, unshackled by the burdens of uncertainty, and motivated by a vision for what lay beyond the verdict. We stand here today, united not just by grief, but by the hope that what unfolds next will define our shared future. Justice is not an end point, it's the opening of doors that have long been shut. The audience leaned into his words, understanding that this was not merely a speech, but a call to arms, a reminder that justice must transition into tangible change, reforming the very structures that had contributed to Mandela's tragic end. At the forefront of this transformative quest lay the groundwork set by Tasha and Eliza. Together, their collaboration had borne fruit in the form of new community initiatives aimed at fostering understanding and repairing the tattered bond between law enforcement and civilians, programs that sought to educate officers on implicit bias while instilling in them a sense of accountability and communal respect were being rolled out with unprecedented support. Eliza, seated in a front row pew, nodded perceptibly at Jackson's call to action. Her role as a pivotal ally undeniable. She knew well that the bond between the badge and the people had to be reforged not in the fires of adversity, but in the quiet everyday acts that brought them together in shared purpose and respect. Tasha rose next to speak, her energy infectious, her presence igniting excitement that hummed through the crowd. "This is our movement," she proclaimed, voice rich and unyielding, each voice powerful, each step leading us away from division and towards unity, a unity Mandela always believed in. She spoke of youth mentorship programs where experienced community leaders would guide younger generations towards civic responsibility and empowerment. She detailed plans for open forums designed to elevate minority voices and discussions where city leaders would not just listen, but integrate the feedback into actionable policy. Her words sparked laughter, tears, and applause, a symphony of emotions that reverberated through the sacred space, settling into hearts hungry for a future sculpted by mutual respect and understanding. In parting, Jackson took a final step before the congregation, silencing the room with a gaze that included everyone. Hope and redemption are not abstracts. They are tangible and attainable if we commit to the cause. We owe Mandela more than memory. We owe him movement, a legacy propelled forward. In the ensuing days, ideas turned into action. Committees forming with volunteers from every walk of life, eager to dedicate time and effort to transform visionary ideals into reality. Strangers became collaborators, woven together by a shared commitment to reimagine their world anew. For Jackson and the family Mandela had left behind, the journey of healing was ever present, a tender, tentative embrace with a world that could be both brutal and kind. The promise fulfilled in court was now a torch passed onto the streets, illuminating paths that demanded courage to tread and compassion to shape. As evening descended, casting soft shadows through stained glass and illuminating the faces of those stepping forward into the cool night, the message was unequivocal: hope had triumphed. Nurtured by the seeds of Mandela's enduring legacy, together, shaped by mourning and bolstered by resilience, they moved towards a horizon of light with possibility, a future not just dreamt of, but crafted by hands willing to mold justice into the cornerstone of communal strength and rebirth. As the courtroom's hefty doors creaked open once more, the air inside was thick with anticipation, charged by the collective breath of a community poised at the brink of a pivotal moment. This was it, the height of the legal drama, where ideals met consequences, and the verdict would not merely echo within these walls, but extend its reach through the seaness of society. Jackson sat at the edge of the gallery, his presence both a silent testament to the journey undertaken and a declaration of the legacy he was determined to see honored. Around him, familiar faces bore the marks of pain and resilience, their expressions a blend of serenity and tension, hope and worrying, an assemblage of lives forever changed and stories seeking closure in this hallowed space. The judge, a pillar of gravitas amidst the unfolding tempest, took his seat. His stern gaze swept over the courtroom before settling on the jury, their faces now etched with the gravity of the task bestowed upon them. The moment was heavy, fraught with the potential to heal or to further wound, to confirm that justice was not a distant ideal, but an attainable reality. "We have reached a verdict," the foreperson announced. The words, simple yet profoundly significant, reverberating in every corner of the room. The silence that followed was profound, breaths held, hearts poised, a collective pause before the scales of justice tipped. As the guilty verdict was delivered, the room erupted in a multitude of responses, a spontaneous expression of relief, vindication, and unburdened sorrow mingling into a tapestry of catharsis. Tears once restrained now flowed freely, and whispers of gratitude threaded through heartfelt embrace. Jackson felt the weight of it all. The resolution, the fractured dreams of a life interrupted, and the tenuous hope for a better future settle upon him as a bittersweet balm, salving the wounds yet to heal fully. It was a victory marked not by celebration alone, but by the solemn remembrance of the cost at which it was won. Beside him, Anaka wept, her tears a testament to love and loss, mingled with the relief of Longavu justice. Jackson enveloped her in a comforting embrace, their unity and unspoken pledge that today mark not an end point, but a stepping stone in their marching line toward systemic change. Ellen, having steered this legal ship through turbulent waters, allowed herself a rare moment of emotional release, acknowledging silently alongside Jackson that the burden of the past could now transform into the foundation of the future they aspired to build. The reverberations of the verdict extended beyond the courthouse steps, casting ripples through Birmingham streets and lanes. The crowds that had gathered outside, supporters of justice, advocates of reform, erupted into cheers and applause, their voices a chorus of determination and unwavering resolve. Banners lifted high reflected a newfound unity, their colorful declarations catching sunlight as they were waved in defiance of past transgression. Television cameras relayed the scenes to waiting audiences nationwide. The compelling narrative of triumph against systemic oppression touched hearts far and wide. An example not just of a battle won in court, but of resilience breaking through the dense canopy of disbelief. As Jackson emerged into the fresh air, the sun dazzlingly bright overhead, he stood at the forefront of this spontaneous gathering, accepting the congratulations, the handshakes, the occasional tears-soaked embraces. To the media, to those gathered, he spoke once more, not just as a son acknowledging a personal tragedy, but as a messenger of Mandela's hard-fought cause. "This verdict isn't just about my father. It's about calling for accountability and systemic reform that benefits us all. We owe each other bravery. Bravery to confront hard truths and to build solutions that unite rather than divide, he said with conviction, calling upon all who listened to join in the transformative work ahead. The awakening within Birmingham was palpable, an undeniable testament to Mandela's memory becoming a beacon for change, a reminder that while wounds were deep, healing was possible with justice as the guide. From monuments to street corners, the city buzzed with newfound energy, its conversation shifting from despair to resolve, plotting paths to persistence and progress. For Jackson, the story of his father was forever woven into the narrative of a community claiming its dignity through unified action. In the face of adversity, they had not turned back nor faltered, but had anchored themselves in resilience and hope against the weight of injustice. As the day drew to a close, Jackson knew that this tide of change, though it was unstoppable. It carried with it the solemn responsibility to ensure that the seeds sown would flourish into a future unmarred by the failures of their past, a promise not just to Mandela, but to every soul who dared to dream of a more equitable tomorrow. In the days following the verdict, Birmingham awakened like a city renewed, as if shaking off layers of doubts and despair to embrace a season of possibilities. The community, once laden with the weight of unanswered questions, now moved with a purposeful urgency, emboldened by the collective conviction that meaningful change was within their grasp. Reconciliation became the anthem, an echo of shared humanity blending through church halls, schools, and community centers. The hard places where old wounds were acknowledged and bridges could be built. Conversations ignited in earnest, dissolving long-held silences as friends and strangers came together to chart a future that valued unity over division. In the heart of this development, Jackson found himself deeply immersed, a guiding force determined to follow through on the promises they had championed in court. He navigated gatherings large and small, each meeting underscored by the humility of knowing that change was both a privilege and a responsibility, a mantle inherited from Mandela's enduring legacy. The city council meetings, once arenas of bureaucratic formality, were transformed into participatory forums wherein community voices rose as significant forces in crafting policy. Here, Tasha flourished, her leadership galvanizing residents from diverse backgrounds to share insights and ideas, stoking conversations that shifted from the theoretical to the tangible. One evening at a council meeting in the library's makeshift space, Tasha presented initial findings from the community-led rounds. Her words conveyed not only optimism, but a pragmatic pathway forward. A strategic blend of evidence-based policy recommendations and bold visions for revitalization that offered everyone a place. We must be deliberate, Tasha urged, pausing to survey the room filled with eager faces and attentive ears. This isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about laying the groundwork for a society where justice is equitable and accessible and where every voice can truly be heard. Her declarations resonated, inspiring resounding applause. Movements sprouted around these ideas, task forces organized to tackle crucial community issues such as policing reforms, education funding, and economic upliftment for marginalized groups. Meanwhile, Eliza spearheaded an internal review process within the police department, unflinching in her determination to address systemic biases and enforce accountability from within. Supported by growing public trust, her initiatives introduced rigorous officer training programs that emphasized cultural competency, empathy, and de-escalation, an approach designed not just to prevent tragedy, but to foster understanding and reinforce bonds with the communities they protect. Through these collective efforts, promises made to Mandela began to take root, reflecting a landscape enriched by collaboration and hope, one where every corner of Birmingham buzzed with the potential of a better tomorrow. As Jackson walked these vibrant streets, he felt a warmth and camaraderie echo in every interaction, a reminder of Mandela's spirit, transcending divisions and binding them all in a common cause. Strangers greeted him as a friend, acknowledging the pivotal role he had played in turning their collective grief into a resolute push for justice. While the road to meaningful transformation was undeniably arduous, the path was forged with the sweat and passion of those unwilling to let Mandela's life pass without impact. Through him, they had discovered a shared humanity, an understanding that their destinies were intertwined, that their fates were collectively shaped by the actions they took together. With purpose in their hearts and conviction in their steps, Birmingham's diverse tapestry wove a story of redemption that rippled outward, a beacon for cities nationwide, yearning for change. Here was proof that grief, when met with determination, could forge powerful alchemy, turning darkness into light and injustice into a call for empathy. As the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow over buildings and streets filled with new life, Jackson paused, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. How unity born of hope and resilience had given rise to the dreamscape unfolding before him. Despite the challenges looming ahead, he realized that no battle was insurmountable, nor any dream too distant, for justice won with love and nurtured with integrity could ignite the winds of change, carrying its promise into the corridors of tomorrow, where the dawn heralded not just continuation but renewal. In this revitalized Birmingham, the legacy of Mandela Johnson would live on, not only in memory, but in the fabric of a future reshaped by hands and hearts bound toward a single shining goal: justice and dignity for all. As the city of Birmingham embraced this newfound spirit of unity and purpose, a reckoning with the past began in earnest, an unavoidable confrontation with the deep-seated wounds that had festered beneath the surface for far too long. It was a necessary journey fraught with introspection and tales both painful and transformative as residents revisited their own roles and experiences within a system historically polarized by color line. In this overdue reflection, community centers hosted events that cracked open those hidden narratives, turning silent histories into loud declarations. These were evenings filled with truth-telling and soul-bearing, a space where individuals of all backgrounds could lay bare the burdens carried and the dreams deferred. In one such gathering, an intergenerational group assembled beneath the stained glass windows of the local church, a kaleidoscope of hues painting the walls with symbols of hope. Jackson, Anna, and others arrived, each a vital strand in the intricate tapestry of lives woven together by injustice but united by the pursuit of betterment. The sanctuary's atmosphere resonated with the solemn hum of anticipation, the collective inhale of a community poised to confront shadows and illuminate truths long concealed. Among the participants was Reverend Clarence, a man whose steady voice had long served as the moral compass for Birmingham, guiding them through storms of racial terror and societal violence. With the crowd settled into the pews, Reverend Clarence approached the pulpit, his presence of both gentle and commanding force. Tonight we speak not only with our lips, but with the language of our lives, lives lived under and through oppression. To heal, we must reconcile with our stories, our failures and triumphs alike. A floor open to stories that lay beyond official records, uncharted in annals of policy. An elder stood first, voice trembling not with age but the weight of memory. I lived through 63, he began, referencing the pivotal year of systemic violence and resistance in Birmingham. We fought with every fiber, and still the terrors of that time haunt us. But I see hope here, mirroring Mandela's perseverance, proof that even wounds can mend when faced with courage. His testimony ignited a spark, a tribute not only to those who had marched alongside, but to the legacy of resilience carried forward with each new generation. Soon another voice rose, a young teacher from a local high school whose ardor for justice established her as a beacon for her students. History remains in our halls and our hearts, and teaching the truth, the full unvarnished truth, is how we ensure that those mistakes are never repeated, she affirmed passionately. In Mandela's memory, we have the compass we need to navigate our path. A testimony is rolled forth, so, too did the stories of young people, capturing in vivid language the modern-day linchpins of racism disguised within contemporary veils. They recounted instances of prejudice masked under the cloak of tradition, slanderous whispers in locker rooms, biases enacted through curriculum, and lost opportunities due to unconscious yet impactful biases. Yet amid the laments was an anthem of rising hope. They shared how Mandela's narrative had influenced their own journey toward activism, serving as a transformative guide in the quest to draw strength from their roots to challenge the status quo. Jackson listened with an attentiveness born of understanding, his heart flaring with admiration for these torchbearers of truth, their determination shone as brightly as the sunlit patterns that danced across the sanctuary floor, darting through shadows and illuminating possibility. When at last the evening drew to a close, Reverend Clarence bid them farewell with a prayer not for answers, but for understanding and light. A light that might guide them through the complexities of identity, responsibility, and redemption. Stepping out into the cool evening, Jackson gazed upon a city, rediscovering its heart. Every corner humming with tales yet told and futures not yet realized. He felt an unspoken assurance, a promise born from the tangled mess of tribulation and hope, past failings and earnest rebuilding. Hope for in Birmingham, where every step forward rippled through the community as the shared creation of an unbreakable chain of commitment, dignity, and justice. Mandela's legacy stood unwavering, a beacon guiding them all through the waters of reconciliation. As they peered into the experiences of the past, their eyes turned expectantly to the promise of dawn, knowing that united, no obstacle was insurmountable, no darkness too shadowy to overcome. Morning light spilled gently across Birmingham's streets, casting long, hopeful shadows that seemed to stretch toward an ever-expanding horizon. In the days following the communal reckonings, an undeniable shift began to take root, a transformation mirrored in everyday interactions and institutional changes alike. The spirit of Mandela Johnson lived heroically, not just in remembrance, but in action, a catalyst to transform despair into progress. This change was most palpable in the smallest of interactions. A nod of acknowledgement between strangers at a bus stop, gestures of mutual respect in corner stores, and conversations that crossed formerly rigid boundaries. The city hummed with an energy that many had only dreamed possible, an energy born from a willingness to listen, learn, and grow. Tasha stood at the helm of numerous initiatives focused on sowing seeds of equality in the fertile soil of a reimagined community. Her voice became a touchstone, her leadership cascading through the revival of grassroots efforts that once seemed unattainable. Community gardens blossomed where asphalt had claimed space, their vibrant colors a testament to collaboration and shared stewardship over newly cultivated land. One such project, Rays of Change, paired youth advocates with mentors across sectors, nurturing leadership grounded in empathy and inclusion. It was here, amidst the nurturing greenhouses and open-air classrooms, that the dreams of a brighter future took shape, where young minds sculpted visions of a world unfettered by prejudice. Jackson dedicated time to volunteering with the program, finding solace in the laughter and animation of those whose futures Mandela had unknowingly touched. Surrounded by the young voices charting pathways of revolution through green leaves and open skies, he was consistently reminded of his father's indomitable spirit, a call to unwavering persistence. Eliza, meanwhile, pursued her mission to cultivate guardian ambassadors from within the police force. These officers engaged directly with neighborhood groups, embracing dialogue and partnership as tools of peace rather than their once counterpart of distrust rooted in misunderstanding. In the precinct, the transformation was evident in hallways filled with collaborative discussion, the warmth of shared purpose replacing once echoing distrust. It was an ethos shift, a transcendence, anchored in the understanding that protection and justice were inextricably linked with community trust. In classrooms, educational reforms unveiled their potential. Curricula embracing global histories woven with narratives of resilience and advocacy. Teachers leaned into discussions on race, freedom, and justice not as abstract concepts, but as living ideals, strengthened by Mandela's enduring example. The cultural landscape experienced Renaissance as well. Art galleries and theaters hosted showcases that honored stories of struggle as much as they celebrated triumph. Audiences drank deeply from wells of creativity, absorbing stories that reflected the depth and color of their community's struggles and aspiration. Jackson often wandered through these exhibitions, feeling his father's pulse in every brushstroke and performant word. Each piece served as a reminder of resilience, the enduring power of art to transcend and transform, to unify scattered voices into cohesive, harmonious choir. As the city hummed with renaissance and rebuilding, these collective efforts generated momentum that stretched beyond Birmingham's borders, inspiring similar movements in cities nationwide. Mandela's legacy, the quiet dignity of his life, and the loud demand for justice his loss had inspired cultivated seeds of unity that grew in communities yearning for change. Through it all, the daily conversations persisted between neighbors, policymakers, and friends old and new. Their candor laid the foundation upon which reconciliation and bond strengthening rested. With every gentle touch, every solemn pledge, a brick lane toward future skylines of shared equity. Standing upon the cusp of such transformation, Jackson felt Mandela's presence in every facet of this spirited journey. A guardian not only of place, but of promise, for in every corner of the city, cherished by Mandela, there pulsed a community newly awakened, bold enough to envision, act, and encapsulate hope, rendered boundless by hearts open to its call. It was a commitment more than a conclusion, a tapestry, in which each person, bound by shared humanity, was stitched and thread in a masterpiece of justice unfurling. Together they embraced the narratives of the past and the undeniable light of the present, ready to harmonize potential into a canvas painted by hands wiser, more tender, and more resolute than before. The soft hues of dawn gently touched Birmingham, casting a golden glow over a city that had embraced the journey from darkness to light with courage and conviction. The courthouse steps, once a stage for heavy moments of tension and transformation, now bore witness to the closing of a long chapter where faces turned upward, reflecting the spirit of a community renewed. Jackson walked these familiar steps with purpose, each footfall echoing not only the past, but signaling a hopeful cadence toward tomorrow. Beside him, Annika matched his stride, her presence a reminder of their shared mission, a mission both perilous and purifying. The morning air was cool and invigorating, heady with the scent of hope and the hint of something new. As the siblings gathered at the steps, now bathed in sunlight, they were joined by the many lives Mandela's story had touched. Individuals who had become allies, each carrying a piece of the journey within them, hearts united in shared purpose. Kasha was there, her passion constant as the dawn. Eliza, her resolve radiant in the knowledge that change was not just possible, but that inevitable. And Ellen, her steps measured by the assuredness of truth that had paved the way. These were more than people. They were symbols of the fight to remake the world in Mandela's vision. One stitched from understanding and unyielding in its quest for righteousness, today was special. It marked the memorial dedication to Mandela, a place where his legacy could root itself firmly in the soil of history while inspiring future generations. It rose a garden with royal arms like sentinels, casting gentle shadows over the rose bushes carefully tended, each bloom a testament to lessons learned, struggles endured, and victories cherished. This garden is not just a place, it's a promise, Jackson began, addressing the crowd gathered in solemn joy. It's a promise that reminds us every day with each petal and leaf that justice is alive, flourishing not only in our dreams, but in our reality. Mandela's spirit endures here, not hidden in shadows of the past, but boldly shining into the future. The crowd, a symphony of generations bound together, nodded their agreement, eyes glistening with the promise of permanency this tribute represented. Among them were teachers, students, advocates, and officers, a myriad mosaic sewn from whispers of hope that Mandela had whispered into being long ago. As each person placed a hand upon the letters etched onto the memorial, They felt the pulse of promise thrumming upward, a constant reminder that Mandela's fight, though ignited by loss, blossomed into a reality transcended by love and boundless potential. Jackson and Anaka stood aside, watching this interconnected web of life flush into vivid reality, knowing deep within that this was the culmination of their father's dream, voiced and vindicated. For here was proof, hope and integrity, born from adversity and nurtured into forces for genuine, sustainable change. In the murmuring crowd, someone softly began to hum a hymn, a melody woven from threads of faith, patience, and enduring resilience. It traveled along heart's pathways, each voice joining the harmony until it penetrated the space, rising like a sun, unwavering in its path. As the hymn subsided, the air filled once more with the quiet murmur of commitment, a resolute vow etched into the hearts of every person to carry Mandela's light, ensuring his legacy flickered on in their continual endeavors and lives. In that gentle moment, as the congregation of souls dispersed, Jackson felt the peaceful hand of Mandela rest warmly on his shoulder, guiding him forward, whispering that the journey was never solely his. It belonged to every man, woman, and child, determined to strive for justice. He stood silently, internally, echoing the testimonies lived and loved here, understanding that though the chapter may close, the story continued to unfold, rich with color, guided by unerring purpose. Thus, in this community determined to be seen for who it is, not pieces, not divisions, but a whole created from relentless love, a dawn crowned with promises took root. "Thank you, Dad," Jackson whispered into the soft winds, carrying dreams to distant lands. His voice a confident pledge as the world watched, ready to walk beside him in the inherent fight for better days. In every leaf, every blossom, every soul, touched by the grace of a man who believed in the power to unite and overcome, the question remained eternally potent. How will you honor the legacies laid before you? If you hear their call, let it be a reminder to like, share, and subscribe to the journey, ensuring that their message never dwindles, merely blooms a